John, welcome back. We've kind of been talking about this with Equinety and just kind of like going kind of part two with this. And one thing that I just from doing some research of just talking about amino acids and BCAAs and just kind of I just wanted to kind of go over like a few of my notes that this is just for like research with humans and kind of the benefits, but just me Googling some stuff. And then I was just kind of thinking like how it relates to horses. So I was just going to kind of start it off with like these notes that I had, but the benefits of BCAAs would be muscle growth stimulation, reduced muscle soreness and damage, increase in endurance, prevention of muscle wasting, improvement in workout intensity and performance, enhanced recovery, boosts immune system, supports hormone balance, improved mental focus, and promotes fat loss.
Right.
So obviously, like these are for someone that's performance-based or wanting to be efficient in sport or like life, there's a ton of benefits to amino acids and just kind of that going down that route, like showing how you can optimize your performance, right?
Sure. So, yeah, for years, amino acids have been used in the older folks, the anti-aging crowd, for anti-aging properties. And of course, athletes have used them for years for the benefits that you listed there. And, when you break it down to mammals, dogs, horses, cats, people, elephants, the cells primarily work the same internally because we're all mammals. And so the interesting thing is when you eat a protein in a good steak, the protein molecule is too big to be absorbed. And so the body has to break it down into amino acids where it can be absorbed. And this just takes time. But once it's absorbed, then the body rebuilds it back into protein. So that's kind of how the process works. And so like with our product, it originally was marketed to the 50 plus crowd as an anti-aging youth formula. I'm 73. No,
okay.
I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, wow. Okay.
And so I learned, this was up in Canada back in 1998. And I learned about it in 2006 and got it into Major League Baseball as a sports supplement. And then 2014 worked out a deal to use the same formula and put it in a tub and call it Equinety. And so at one time, all three products were sourced from the same raw materials and packaged in the same facility under 3 different labels. So that's a little bit of the history. I know we'll kind of probably get into that a little bit later, but going back to your point, the benefits of amino acids are really off the charts. And so we just find ourselves in a, constant education, which is one reason why we're doing this, to, help educate people on why it's important to use the right amount of amino acids or the right amino acids, for your horse.
Right. So kind of starting with this muscle growth and kind of that portion of it, I think this is like, for me, it's like when you exercise or when you're using muscles, like the actual recovery. And then when you do get sore. So I just kind of go to relating that with my horses. And as we're using them, I know like a lot of trailer miles, for example, the muscle contractions that a horse has to use just in a decently long trip somewhere, sure. It's pretty outstanding. And then they get worked pretty hard. And so there's a lot of lactic acid buildup. And then when we add that with diet, getting things put into their body and then drinking, all of that, it just seems like the consistency of all of this, it gets pretty tough, right? And so like with aminos, how do they kind of tie into using them with kind of your like normal feed program and essentially like, because you mentioned the steak, right? And getting like breaking down the protein from the steak. So for example, when we are feeding our horses and supplementing our horses, how does Equinety kind of just help that overall, like in general, right?
Right. So the unique thing with this formula, it's very specific to do a very specific thing, which is stimulate the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland is about the size of a pea, roughly the same size in mammals, dogs, horses, cats, people, elephants. It's, pretty close to the same size. And so what our formula is specifically doing is stimulating the pituitary gland, which is the gland that releases hormones. So once these hormones are released, then the body sends its own hormones to its own problem areas. And so it makes it really easy because it takes a lot of the guesswork out. I mean, you could have 50 head with 50 different things going on. You could have some of the horses in there that don't have anything going on, because a lot of people are figuring out, is with as expensive as horses are, they're using it as a preventative. But it's going to customize to what that horse needs specifically. And there's also going to be commonalities with all of them: softer, shinier coat, filling out. And getting into the muscle, one of the things that's very, very common is really building out that top line. Typically you'll see that in the 2 week to 30-day mark. But it's very common. The hips and the butt and the top line are filling out, look real nice.
Well, and that's probably one of the most used areas for the horse, right? Like that's like one of the first spots. And like when you see a horse that's pretty athletic, that's one of the areas they go to, right? Is like around the hips, like that area is where a lot of strength and power and all that's kind of created in a horse, right? And what they're asked to do too.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of this next thing, essentially like we're optimizing what our horse, like letting our body or our horse's body heal itself or kind of prevent. And that's kind of like, it's just letting the body optimize its nutrition and how it's working or regulating its what it needs and kind of like where it goes, right? As far as where it sends nutrients and things like that. As far as like endurance goes, what's been your feedback from horses kind of on the endurance side and horses that are getting a lot asked out of them?
It's interesting because years ago we would set up at the NBHA Worlds, and we have our little samples, 15-day samples, which we're actually looking at bumping that up to a full 30 days. But what we would do in the beginning of the week is hand out as many of those as we could to as many people as we could. And this was on a Monday, Tuesday, and by Wednesday, Thursday, the feedback is their barrel horses are running tens of seconds faster. Their recovery time after their run is incredible. They're not as agitated. And so that was our first feedback that we got, in the barrel racing world. And then as we got more and more into rodeo, we found that after the whole rodeo season, where you would think these horses are just stick a fork in them because they're done, they are still ready to go. And, barring injuries, Mother Nature stepping in, these horses, they haul great, they eat, they drink, they do everything that everybody's asking them to do because the recovery time is off the charts. We've had feedback where specifically some of these NFR folks, they were going to have to retire their horses multiple times, and they started feeding Equinety, and they're just at the top of their game. Injured horses come back quicker. There was one just recently, we won't mention a name, but supposed to be out for about 4 months, and they're looking at 1 month. And that's very common. Even T-Wade had his horse about 4 years ago that had fractures in both front legs. I think he was supposed to be out for a year and was back in 6 months. So, the recovery aspect of it, not even from the muscle side, but from the repair and the healing, soft tissue, all those types of things, the bone, it's incredible. And touching back on a question you had a minute ago about maybe the feeding programs of different people, what's really interesting for us, 11 years on the market, we've talked to thousands of people around the country, different countries, different feeding programs, different bloodlines, different disciplines, you name it. And typically what people see in the horses when they add just our amino acids, within 2 or 3 days, we've seen complete demeanor changes of horses that have stress, anxiety, or a bit spooky. That is so common. And my opinion on that there's something bothering the horse, which is causing the stress and anxiety because they're agitated, irritated, whatever. So now you give them the product, the body fixes that little issue, and so now they don't have the stress and anxiety anymore. To me, that logically makes sense.
Right.
In about a week to 2 weeks, they feel better under saddle. The recovery, stamina, focus is big, what people start to see. And then 2 weeks to 30 days, they're starting to fill out the top line and hip like we were talking about. The coat shine, softer and shinier coat. You get into 30 days and beyond, and the overall hoof quality, sole depth, cracked hoof walls. You can get into laminitis and white line and all these types of things. And when you really understand what the product is doing, is giving the body what it needs to release its own hormones. So you're balancing the hormones, you're helping the body do what it would naturally do anyways. You're just giving it a little bit of help.
Right.
And so, we've had so many people through the years, less injections, they just hold longer. Sometimes they can skip a year or cut them in half. You start looking at all this, it's saving a lot of money. You get into the soft tissue, the gut issues, they just haul better. So it's pretty remarkable what that tiny little scoop will do.
Right. With that, like the feed programs themselves, do you talk to people that like kind of go a hotter feed program, meaning like more protein, like a higher starch? Like, do you have like preferences, or is there like, what does that kind of look like as far as, because you do see a lot of different feed programs, right?
I think the greatest benefit that we have is it doesn't matter what your feed program is. Because, the thing is, there's going to be parts of the country that lack certain nutrients or minerals or whatever the case is. So, the advantage that we have, it doesn't matter what your feeding program is. But if you'll just add this scoop to the feed, you are going to see a difference in 30 days or less.
Right, because you're optimizing the feed and nutrients that they're getting out of it. Right. And then what about like the timing on when you suggest to take aminos? Does that matter? Like before you ride them, after, same time every day? Or what does that kind of look like?
So typically what we found, if just put a scoop in the morning feed, and with food, it just takes a little bit to absorb because it's got to work with the food and everything. But what happens is it stimulates the pituitary. You have a spike in hormones. And now these hormones have a 23.5-hour life cycle. So they're just on the slow decline. So by tomorrow morning, the hormone levels are back to where they were the morning before when you started. So that's why you give a scoop every day. They spike up and then they just come down, spike up and come down. Now, for an injured horse, or for one that you're really working hard and hauling and doing all the things, if you give a scoop in the morning and a scoop in the evening, you never allow the hormones to get back down to here because you gave another scoop. So it just keeps the hormone levels elevated all the time. So it's not a loading dose. It's just you're stimulating the pituitary basically every 12 hours. So you're just keeping the hormone levels elevated. So that's where, with the injured horses, they always come back ahead of schedule. And with, of course, the performance horses, the recovery and stamina, I would say just giving one scoop, you're going to notice changes in your horses. Now, it might not be in your younger horses, you might not see as significant because, in younger horses, where you're targeting there with this product is the cut down of the lactic acid, the recovery, the stamina, the focus. Those are all big things to watch for, the shiny coat. Every now and then there would be somebody that after 30 days are like, well, you know what? I didn't really notice anything. And I say very few in 11 years, it might be a handful of people. And normally I would say that, well, maybe they're not feeding it every day or they're not that in tune with their horse. But one that was recent, back this January, was a guy that, no, he knows his stuff.
Right.
And so we had a conversation just like what we're having now. And I said, okay, bump it to 2 scoops. Do a scoop in the morning, scoop in the evening, and let's see what happens. Shoot, he called me in 2 weeks. He's like, I cannot believe. And so for that situation, he needed 2 scoops. And, the great thing about it is there's not any negative side effects. So you can, if 1 scoop works great, do 1 scoop. If 2 scoops works better, then do the 2 scoops. But any more than 2 scoops, now you're just wasting it.
Right. Right. They can only absorb so much.
Right.
So even if you do feed 2 or 3 scoops and they might only need 1, that's all their body's going to take.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so like just being consistent with the timing, is there side effects like to aminos, or what does that kind of, as far as like data suggests?
Yeah. I mean, there's not any negative side effects. And it's all positive because, amino acids, we have to have amino acids. They're the building blocks of protein. So, and of course, you can get into essential, not essential, and all that kind of stuff. But I am Oklahoma educated, so
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, a lot of people, I will say, the majority of people, they don't really care about all the nitty gritty details and the sciencey aspect. Now you're going to have the people that do, but for the most part, they probably already know that information anyways. But at the end of the day, when you're looking, it's all about the horse. I mean, what can you do to give your horse the best of what it needs? And, what we found, especially I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, we just had more and more feedback. When we look at the people that we sponsor, we also know people that use our product that we don't sponsor. And as we watch them year after year, they're making more money based on what we're seeing. They're just winning more, and their horses are able to perform more, and they're not injured as much. And if they are injured, they come back quicker than what they normally would have. I mean, we just see this over and over and over and over again.
Right, with the performance, with the recovery, with the endurance, just muscle health, it seems to be higher.
The muscle health, the recovery, when you get on your horse and you're getting ready to go, you have in your mind what you need to do, and you have in your mind what you need that horse to do. And if that horse can't do what you need him to do to win, then, well, that's not good. I mean, that's not why you're out there. And so we've just seen it so many times that this product really helps keep those horses in the condition that you need them in.
Right. And then what about on the hormone side of this? You've kind of mentioned that, but when we say like the benefits of like the hormone side, have you seen it what about like breeding programs or mares or just
Sure.
What does that kind of look like?
Well, it's interesting because probably 4 or 5 years ago, we started getting feedback from breeding facilities that were seeing an increase in motility and fertility. And there's one in particular out in North Carolina. They run 200 mares and 20 studs. And this was before we had the oil. So we were 7 years on the market with just the amino acids. And then 4 years ago, we came out with the oil. But she said that just using the amino acids completely changed her whole breeding program. Increased motility, the fertility in the mares, and, it helps with development. And so a couple years ago, I was talking with T-Wade, and I asked him if he knew of anybody in the breeding world that, we could give a good, solid test through breeding season, and so we could get, a little bit more credibility around that whole thing. So he makes a phone call and calls me back, and he goes, "I got somebody for you." I said, "Who's that?" He goes, "Bill Myers." I said, "Oh, okay, all right, let's do this."
Yeah.
So Bill was in Arizona, so I sent him product. And, Bill told me straight up, he goes, "Listen, I'm not just going to get behind a product for the sake of doing it." He goes, "I know you guys are doing a lot in the industry and everything, but I got to see results." And I said, "Fair enough, take as much time as you need." And so by the time he got back up to South Dakota, they collect, and this was on Mr. Sassy Frenchman, and he had a hock injury. Was coming off a hock injury, and Billy collected him, and Billy says, "Did you give him something? Because his count's higher than it normally has been." And he goes, "Yeah, I've been giving it Equinety." And Billy's like, "Whatever it is, just keep doing it." So I ran into Billy at the NFR in 22, and he goes, "You made my life so easy in the breeding shed." I said, "What does that mean?"
Yeah, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So he goes, "Well, normally halfway through season, they're looking rough." And he goes, "I can't ship as much." And he goes, "Using that Equinety," he goes, "My gosh," he goes, "not only did they keep looking better and better as each month was going by," he goes, "but I could ship as much as I wanted." And he goes, "It just, the stress level for him was way down." And so we've been hearing more and more and more of this. And again, different disciplines, it all works no matter what the discipline is, and feeding program, bloodlines. But, and then, being able to add the oil too. I don't know if you want to get into that now, if you wanted to elaborate on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So about 4 years ago, well, it's a little bit longer than that. We've been on the market 4 years, but we took a year to do some field trials. There was a vet out of Arkansas that contacted me, and he was using the amino acids, absolutely loved it. And he goes, "Hey, have you ever thought about coming out with another product?" And I said, well, not for the sake of coming out with one. I think there's a few too many on the market as it is. And he goes, yeah, that makes sense. He goes, well, I'm a big fan of oils. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, there's umpteen million oils on the... He goes, I know. He goes, but, there's just nothing that's really, really high quality. He goes, and I think it'd be a great fit with the amino acids and everything that you guys are doing with Equinety. And so what we're always educating on the amino acids, and we're educating on oils. I mean, if you're an oil fan, then you really want to make sure that the oil that you're using is higher in omega-3s than versus omega-6s. So oils that are high in omega-6 are like corn, vegetable, soy. It's high.
What does that do, the higher in like omega-6s typically?
It's going to cause inflammation internally. Now, outside the body, they look good. They put on weight. I mean, for years, people dumped the corn oil and vegetable oil to the horses, and it fills them out, makes a shiny coat and all that. But internally, there's a lot of inflammation, which, people with anything with an itis on it, arthritis and things like that is inflammation inside.
Right.
And so what you want to try to do is bring the inflammation down, which is why ours is a flaxseed-based omega-3 oil. And so,
right quick, is that because of like digestibility too? With like an omega-6, they seem to be. Is it higher, like just where it's higher, like processed, and is that kind of what we see with that a little bit, or?
You know what? I don't know about that. I don't have.
I just know like with humans, there's quite a lot of data and like getting a lot of information, like with fried food and like different things like that. Then it's like, well, because your body is not processing it as well. And that's where like inflammation's coming from. So I was just kind of looking for like the kind of the correlation.
Well, I mean, getting on the human side, way back, they didn't have all this vegetable and corn, and I'm going way back because, they would use beef tallow.
And people are a lot healthier.
Yeah, people are a lot healthier. And of course, you didn't eat all the fast food and the fried foods and all that kind of stuff. But your body needs fat. It just needs a healthy fat.
Right.
And so a flaxseed-based omega-3 is a healthy fat.
Yeah.
And so it's still going to help put the weight on and the super shiny coat. So what's interesting for me through the years is like whatever level your horse is at, and you add the aminos, it kicks them up into a different level of the look, the feel, all the things that you want. And then when you add the oil, it even kicks them up a whole nother notch. Because the thing with an omega-3 based oil, it's great for the joints, it's great for brain function, it's great for, the shiny coat and the filling out, all those types of things. The other thing that's in there is 1,000 IUs of natural cold pressed vitamin E, which, there's a lot of horses that are deficient in vitamin E. And there's a lady out in Washington that deals in the gypsy horse world, and she's been using our products for years. And she, I guess one of the things, or one of the challenges with gypsy horses, genetically, they are 50% of them are deficient in vitamin E. And I didn't get into a lot of details, questions based on our conversation. She said you just have to catch it quick and get those vitamin E levels up.
Right.
Otherwise, that's not reversible, and there's a whole slew of problems that come with that. And so she did some studies with some vitamin E products in the market, and she used ours in the study. And what she told me was the synthetic vitamin E would get the vitamin E levels where they needed to be on average about 5 months, which I didn't even know the synthetic vitamin E worked, but apparently it does. But that's too slow for what she wanted. And she used our product in the study, and it got the vitamin E levels there in 30 days.
And that's probably like, because it's created cold pressed, which is kind of essentially you're not heating it up, and that's what breaks. Can you kind of help me along with this?
Yeah,
like when it's synthesized, right? You got to heat it up, and the nutrients might not be as easy to digest, or they might that actually might disappear, right? When you heat it up and kind of breaks them down.
Yeah, it breaks the integrity down. And typically the heat will destroy the integrity of whatever it is.
Right.
Interestingly enough, the cold, even the super cold, doesn't bother these products. So it was only like a week ago, I got a text message from a gal up in Michigan, And she goes, you're not going to believe this, but I had a bunch of oil products in our barn and they were all frozen except for your Equinety Ultimate OEC. And it was -2. And so I text the vet that helped us develop the product. And I said, why is that? Yeah. He goes, you know what? I'm not sure. He goes, but I had oil in the barn that was open with winds hauling through there. And he goes, mine didn't freeze either, So, you don't have to worry about the stuff freezing. But anyways, and then the third element is the colloidal silver, which, more and more people are becoming familiar with colloidal silver. But that really helps with the gut. It helps with the kind of an anti-fungus, antibacterial type thing. And it's not that there's anything unique with these ingredients. It's just there's nothing on the market that has all three of them in it. And, from our standpoint, there's nothing on the market like our amino acids. And one of the things that we always recommend to people is don't change anything that you're giving your horse. Don't stop using anything. Don't change anything. Just add a scoop and watch what happens over 30 days. And what we've seen through the years is people start to realize if they're using other things, they're like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to use that. Maybe I don't use that. Maybe I can cut back on this. And they're typically saving 20 to 40% in vet bills and other supplements. Just going back to the hormones, you're helping to balance the hormones. The horse is more balanced from the inside out. They're healthier. They bounce back quicker. And then when you add that oil to it, it just kind of really finishes them out.
Right. Have you seen a lot of, or what's your feedback been like as far as like fat loss goes? Because when you talk about hormones, I know like the other side of that is you can get some horses that get real fat, kind of be a little insulin resistant, things like that. Have you had feedback as far as like fat loss and like what does that look like?
Yeah, so probably what triggers is Cushing's horses, and then you get into all the EPM and the PSSM and all these neurological type things. But a lot of times what we found, the horses that maybe have the barrel belly or maybe a little bit on the larger side, what we found when they start feeding the Equinety is a lot of times they can cut back on the feed, and that's where people start saving money. And years ago, there was somebody, I started feeding, and this one we only had the amino acids. Like, I started feeding your Equinety and my horse got fat. And I'm like, well, that's a teaspoon
yeah,
per day.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole tub is 1.4 pounds or 1.3 pounds, and that's 100 to 115 servings in there. So
right.
Even if you fed the whole thing, that's only not even a pound and a half, And we heard it a couple times. I mean, this is in the early days, and I think what was happening is the horses were becoming balanced hormonally, and they just didn't require as much feed. They were just overfeeding them.
Right.
But we rarely hear that. But if anybody's listening to this and they find that's kind of what we found, they can just reduce the feed.
And what about the other side of that, as far as like getting weight, like horses that are constantly like that have been fat, like, or big horses, getting them to lose weight. And you have those like easy keepers, but those ones you're trying to essentially get more muscle on and get them to lean up. Because I think that's like the one thing that I don't think many people like associate, but I think a lot of injuries come with horses that are like not in good shape or are overweight and things like that. Mm-hmm. So as far as like the fat loss side of it and being able to kind of keep them in better shape, have you had feedback that way?
Well, I think it goes back to how we started this whole thing on the human side, exercising and working out and then supplementing yourself with something that you can get the recovery from so you can do it again the next day.
Yeah.
You can't get everything in your food. And of course, there's a plethora of food qualities across the spectrum. But what we found just by adding the amino acid product, it really helps balance these horses, whether they're easy keep or hard keeper, whether they exercise a lot or not. But, if you have a horse in that condition where you're going to start exercising them, they're obviously going to be sore because they're not used to doing that. So giving them something to help with the recovery aspect. And then on the other side of that, you get into, the pro level or, semi-pro or, where you're going every weekend, ropings and hauling and barrel racing and all the things that you're doing. then you've got to have something to give those horses so they can recover from everything you've asked them to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's like you see a lot of injuries with humans or athletes. It seems to be like overworked muscles or sore muscles, and they kind of tweak it and something weird happens. And I think that's like one like really overlooked thing as far as like roping goes, like that awkward move that happens that you can't really control. And I think that's just, those are the things that like, they're really out of our control. So it's making sure that that muscle is healthy enough to like withstand that, and you've got them in good enough shape to do that, and it's kind of making all that work together essentially.
Yeah, and I think too, as far as a performance horse goes, the more muscle that you have on the horse is protecting a lot of things, and so the exercise that you're doing with them anyways is going to help build the muscle. And by using the Equinety and increasing the hormones is going to help all of the things that go along with that. And, so having a good, solid, muscled horse is going to be important for protection of injuries. Now, Mother Nature can obviously step in there, but in that event, you can feel pretty confident you're going to get them back quicker than you normally would have without using the product.
Right. So with Equinety, there seems to be, you guys were you the first amino? One of the very first.
Yep.
You've been in the industry for quite some time now, right? How long have you been?
11 years.
11 years.
Yep.
And then like I said, our previous podcast, we go into a little different route with everything, but can kind of get the background on that side of it and some of the benefits there too. But so the actual process of making Equinety, and like if someone were to look for aminos, like what are some ways that you'd suggest, like ask questions like, hey, how is it created? How do we know it's a good product? Like how are you getting the most out of like what you're actually purchasing? So
sure. Now actually something popped in my head before we jump into that, going back to the senior horses.
Yeah.
If you've got a geriatric horse, an older horse out there, and you want to see some real magic happen, give them a scoop of Equinety and watch what happens over 30 days, to give it to them every day. And it really changes the spark in their eye, they're feeling good, because at the end of the day, a lot of these horses have been used for years and years and years, and you had to retire them, and, you want the best for them, and they're just turned out, but they've got arthritis, they've got all these different things going on. And it's if you really want to give these horses something to make them feel good, just give them some Equinety and they'll be feeling really good.
And that's kind of your deal throughout it. It seems 30 days is like that sweet spot of like, hey, you can really like, especially if you're in tune with your horse, you can see some pretty dramatic results, right?
Yeah. We've had people through the years, 1 or 2 days they've seen or noticed changes, but within 30 days, everything that I ran down is very, very common. And if you're not seeing anything in 30 days, which I highly doubt, but if you are, just do a scoop in the morning and a scoop in the evening, and you will definitely see. Because the thing is that they're amino acids; they have to work.
Right.
It's not a concoction of some made up product. These are amino acids that are specifically put together to do a specific thing, which is stimulate the pituitary gland. So, going back into your previous question there. So when this was all developed up in Canada, the doctor, he was a family physician, very British, so everything was creme de la creme, no shortcuts. And so he figured out the stack of amino acids. And of course, you can get into, just like anything, there's different qualities of amino acids, just like there's different qualities of, name a product. And so ours are done by fermentation in a laboratory, which is the purest form that you can get. And so, you could buy less expensive amino acids. You can get, go right to the store and buy amino acids, try to put it all together yourself. But the problem with buying it just off the shelf is you don't know necessarily how pure it is. You don't know if there's other fillers in there. And so, with $1 a scoop, it's kind of already all figured out.
Right.
So, I remember years ago, there was somebody said, I could just go buy all the aminos and put them together myself. And it's like, well, have fun with that.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. And then same thing kind of when you get them in the pelleted forms too, they've got to heat them up, kind of combine them. So that's just something to be mindful of when you're looking at products out there. Like the integrity as they put the ingredients together, that's one of the things that kind of can get lost in translation. And
I know there's great products on the market. And the thing is even if the product has a bunch of amino acids in it, if it's in a pelleted form, to make a pellet requires extremely high heat, which destroys the integrity of amino acids. But regardless of that, I'm sure that there's still going to work to some extent. They might not work to the best of their ability because they've been compromised. But, maybe it's going to help with building some muscle, as an example, specifically with muscle. Well, if you like whatever the product is and you just add this, well, not only is it going to help enhance what that food is or feed is or supplement is, but it's going to help do all these other things because this is specific to doing a very specific thing, which is stimulate the pituitary gland. And so now all kinds of things happen because you're allowing the body to repair itself.
Right. And so I think that's kind of the big thing when I was just jumping into this is like I love this idea of like, hey, within 30 days, you can see results and a lot of it. So that's like to kind of be in tune with your horse. It's the muscle growth, it's the soreness, it's the focus, it's the endurance. And that's kind of like all of these things that, we kind of talked about at the beginning.
Sure.
And I was like, all right, well, I think to kind of look for those, that kind of helps like tie that together. Like, oh, I am getting results because like a really healthy horse that's doing well, it could be very subtle, but it's like we're looking kind of long term, right? And then there can be real dramatic changes, like you're saying, in like the top line and like older horses or horses with anxiety, and you can really see that. But that's what's kind of been unique, and like my experience is like if you give it's weird because it's such a big umbrella as far as like what to look for, but it's like, hey, it's the overall health. Yes. Sometimes it's really dramatic. Sometimes it's not as much, but then it's like the longevity's there. And that's what's so, it's like, when you're giving your opinion on like, hey, this is what we're seeing and like, this is the results. I'm like, man, it's crazy to think like how broad it can be. Right.
Yes. And, when we first came on the market, and, people are never looking for anything until you're looking for something. Right. Horse is tweaked, something's going on. So now you're on the search trying to find something to help your horse. So we would give, product to people and for that situation. Well, then they would notice all these other benefits that come along with it. And so in the beginning years, we were documenting all this different stuff that people, because we just kept hearing them over and over and over and over again. Well, then we would get calls and like, hey, this is what's going on with my horse. I kind of saw your product, wanted to know more about it. So it was kind of funny because you would start explaining how it worked and why it worked, and they would get excited. And then you would start telling them the different benefits. And it's like, but if you kept on telling them all the benefits, they're like, okay, there's not a product that can do all that.
Right.
And so they would go emotionally up and then, okay, I'm calling BS on that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, when you understand why and how it works, then it has to do all that stuff. And let's say that you have a horse that has the perfect top line, and then you have another horse that you've tried everything under the sun to put a top line on. Well, you give them both product. Well, the one that already has a top line, it's not going to do anything because it already has a top line. The body knows that.
Right.
But the other one, it's going to really start filling out. And so, that's why it's so unique. Because it is, you're right. It's a broad range of stuff, and it's going to fix what that horse specifically needs. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it because you don't have to have a lot of stuff to fix the stuff that needs to be fixed and stuff that you don't even know that needs to be fixed.
Right. So what's your role with Equinety, kind of your background with the whole business?
Depends on which hat I'm wearing that day.
The very first hat that you got to put on? What was the very first one?
Well, so I think I built our initial website, I think. Pretty sure I did that. And then
So I guess just to kind of give people a little, give me the background on yourself as far as like your role within the business and everything right there for people that don't know.
Well, if we want to go back even before that, so I grew up in Oklahoma.
Yep.
All my family on both sides were all in education, and it was go to college to get a degree to get a good job, and I was just like, yeah, that sounds good, but it's just I wanted more options. I wanted ability to make more money and have more freedoms and choices and things like that. And although, I have a huge respect for teachers because it was all in my family. You get the summers off and vacations and paid year round, and you get your retirement at the end. But it's like I wanted more, and I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian initially, and so I go to college, do all that kind of stuff, and then I go on my first venture as an entrepreneur to show my family I knew what I was doing at 25.
Yeah.
So I go 100,000 in the hole.
Right.
I'm like, well, there's only one way out of here, and that's to climb out of this hole. And so, I was involved in the golf industry. I was involved in the insurance industry. I had a family at this point and 2 boys, and, just trying to find my way into anything. And then I learned about this formula on the sports side in 2006. So I was still in the insurance business, but I was always, doing side hustle stuff because it was just like, I was just looking for something.
Just an entrepreneur, right?
Just an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, just always on the hunt, always trying to do stuff. I'd have 3 or 4 things going. I had a business one time where I would find stuff on Amazon and I would list it on eBay and increase the price by $15, $20.
Yeah.
And then, so I'd sell it on eBay and I'd have other information, order it for them on Amazon. It'd show up to them in an Amazon box. But so I was hustling that, for a while till eBay shut me down. So, anyways, then I was in the real estate seminar business for a while, did a lot of traveling, hated that business, but, I did that to pay the bills and do things and always, just still looking. And I was always kind of tied into the human side of the company there. And so in 2014, I just worked out a deal to use the formula, and we put it in a tub and called it Equinety. And of course, during all of that, you've got business partners and things that go sideways and leave you with all kinds of mess to clean up. And, so I've learned a lot through the years. And I think the thing that's kept me sane is having Christ in my life. And, there's on the side of both products, there's Philippians 4:13. Because I figure everybody that opens a tub can get a blessing somehow.
Right.
So I thank the good Lord every day for, just the company and all the stuff that we've been through. The partnership way back in the deal. I mean, that was it was insane. It got so bad that it was on a Wednesday or Thursday, and I told my wife, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And just the drama and all the stuff that comes along with it. And I said, I'm going to send an email to the owner of the human side of the company because, we had worked out the deal with the Equinety. And she goes, this could be it. Like, it could all be gone. I said, well, so be it. I mean, we've got the Lord and, we'll figure out something. So I sent the email off and she calls me the next day and she goes, I am so glad that you sent this to me because I had so many questions and things just didn't make sense. And you solidified every thought that I had. And it's like, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And when sometimes in your life, when things can be so scary and unknown and, you make a decision to do the right thing or what you believe to be the right thing. And that's what the other person, in this case, needed to hear. And so it fixed everything.
Right.
So it's neat stuff like that. And, so everybody goes through interesting things and scary things. But even in the world today, with as unknown as it is, having Christ in your life is your only real solitude to sanity.
Yeah. Having faith, right?
Yeah.
Do you look back at it now as far as like, there's so many of these like things that they end up being like, wow, I couldn't be in a better spot at that time. And just like, it seems like it's all like,
I thought about that a lot. And I think the best way that I wrapped my head around that was a lot of times when you're going through life, and a lot of times you don't understand why you're in the spot that you're in, or even how you got there, and you don't even know what your tomorrow is going to look like.
Yeah.
When you get ahead 6 months or a year, and you can look back, and it's very easy to connect all the dots and realize you had to go through all those spots to end up where you are right now, which is what makes your personality and everything else. Your whole life experience is based on experiences. So hopefully you just try to make the best decisions you can as you go. But at the end of the day, a lot of times you don't know what you're supposed to do. And that's, having faith and trying to make the right decisions and do the right thing by people. And, like I said, I thank the Lord every day for the blessings we have. And, it's funny because 4 years ago, we didn't even have any team ropers on our team.
Yeah.
And T-Wade was the first one that came on board with us. And, he's been a great ambassador because he's introduced me to pretty much all the ones that we do have on board. But I think, too, with a lot of people with the Cowboy Channel being with the popularity that it is and everything, a lot of people see all the patches and think, oh, well, they're just getting paid to wear the patch or whatever the case is. One thing that I tried to make sure with all of our ambassadors is, one, they were either already using product. T-Wade was using product a year before we even spoke. So that was a pretty easy conversation.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones that they wanted to try it, and I said, well, I'll send you as much product as you want. Try it for as long as you want. Make sure you like the product, and then we'll do something. So typically around 3 weeks was the mark for all of them. They're just like, holy smokes. So, going back to where we started to where it is today, sometimes I got to pinch myself because I'm like, how did we even get here?
Yeah.
But I think when you have a great product and you try to do the right things by people and the integrity and truth and treat people the way that you want to be treated,
When did you realize you had a really, like, we got something here? Like, I got a great product and this is something pretty special to you? Because, that's probably the cool thing about the other side of this is going through a lot of businesses that fail and kind of dealing, or not even fail, but maybe that you don't love or whatever it is, right? It's just not, it's leading you to this spot where you're in now. And so like, once you get to that, like, hey, I've got something, like, what does that kind of look like? And how did you know that?
Well, this was an interesting situation because I already knew what we had before we really launched Equinety, because I knew what it did on the human side.
Yep.
And knowing, again, we're mammals, the cells primarily work the same internally, the pituitary gland works the same. And so from 2006, when I was introduced to the sport product, up until 2014, the people had used it on animals, dogs, horses, cats through the years. It had just never been marketed to any one of these industries.
Right.
And so we had some connections in the horse industry, and we actually started up in Canada in the world of dressage,
okay,
of all things. So we did that for a couple of years, and then before we really broke into the Western world, in the barrel racing initially, and then so I always knew what it did. It's just been a constant education of why you need to use it, and here's why it works and how it works. And I don't go out a whole lot to events, but when I do go out, people, I would say a very common conversation is, I just started using the product. I don't really understand why it works or how it works, but they see it everywhere. Or they'll say, hey, I've seen the product, I've looked into it a little bit, but I don't really know how it works. And so when you explain why and how it works by stimulating the pituitary gland to release hormones, which allows the body to send its own hormones to its own problem areas. Then here's the things that you can expect in 30 days. It's a pretty logical conversation, but it's just educating, and we're always educating.
Yeah. And probably starting out with the dressage industry has to be a big thing, because they're maybe more in tune with their horses, and what they ask out of their horses is maybe even a little bit more than everything in the Western industry too. So like that feedback and getting that was probably a great way of like knowing, hey, this product, like you believe it, but hey, it really is there, right? Is that?
I would think that's a good assessment. And it was in, I don't know if it was 2015 or 16. We were the preferred horse supplement of Equestrian Canada, which is, pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time over the next few years over in Wellington, Florida at Global and all of that. And of course, I'd go over there in my cowboy boots and jeans. I would leave the cowboy hat in the truck.
Yeah.
But, it was just funny because I didn't look the part. And, when I was really trying to get the product off the ground, so I've got quite an extensive background in marketing, and just my mentor, who's still with us, he's 86, just turned 86. So he's taught me so much through the years. And so if you run an ad in a magazine, as an example, if you get, the way that you judge if that's a good ad is if you get a 1 or 2% conversion rate.
Right.
Now, of course, a person will go broke at that conversion rate, but that's what they kind of, look at. Well, when we first started Equinety, and of course, all we had was our Equinety powder, and you could only buy it through our website, which I built.
It's basically all you starting this business. Like you mentioned having kind of a partner, but that was on it's your business, right?
Yeah. I mean, he was there, but he was in Canada. Like,
yeah,
he had nothing to do with day-to-day operating. I found out later, like he was great at coming up with ideas and doing things and getting people excited about stuff, but he didn't know how to do anything.
Right.
So it's just one of those learning curves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worked out best for me, I guess. But so the only place that people could buy our product was through our website. Okay. And so what I would do is I would give away our sample tubs, which were 30 days at the time. I'd give them away on Facebook. And so we had a 30 to 33% conversion rate, which is off the charts.
Right.
And so then what I figured out is like, well, what if I partnered up with people with databases, trainers, farriers, people that did body work, things like that. And so I'd run into people to those types of people, and I would give them product and say, hey, try this on some horses. Well, now they would start spreading it. Well, then their conversion rate would go north of 95% all day long. So knowing all that information, you know that you've got a rock solid product because people will tell you otherwise.
Yes.
So 2 years ago, I shot a commercial on the Cowboy Channel, and we called it the Equinety 30-Day Challenge. And so all people had to do is go to a link on our website, and we gave away, I think, close to 3,000 of those sample tubs. And all we asked in return was pictures, before and after pictures. And so I think that speaks a lot, too, of how much we believe in our product. I mean, we'll put it up against anything that's out there. But I think one of the other great things is if you're feeding, supplements and different things now, don't change anything you're doing. Just add this to it. And then within 30 days, you'll see changes, because before you start feeding this, you already have a baseline of what all your stuff is doing or not doing.
Yeah.
And then you add this to it, and now you start seeing the changes. And then that's typically where people think or decide, well, maybe I don't need to use that, or I can reduce that. And, then they start adding up the savings. It's pretty significant.
Right. You mentioned a mentor earlier. Mm-hmm. What are kind of some of the importances of having a mentor, especially getting into the whole entrepreneur side of things? Like from what you're saying, it's like you're in charge of marketing, you're in charge with every aspect of it, right? Like you're probably managing,
everything.
Right?
Yeah, you're doing,
and especially the early stages, it's supply chain, all of it. It's a big This is a big task, right?
It is. And in the very beginning, there was, another guy, Weston, which a lot of people that deal with us know who Weston is. He's up in Canada. And so him and I basically run the whole operation now. But in those very beginning stages, I was doing any marketing I could do. I mean, I would get there in Florida, I would get in my, pull my camper, and I'd be gone for a week or however long it'd take to go hit as many feed stores as I could. Well, then I realized it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm just a sales guy coming in, and they're loaded up with supplements on their shelves, and they sure don't want to add another one when they don't really even know who we are. So that's where I kind of figured out partnering up with trainers and farriers and things that had a database. So it was a real grassroots movement. But yeah, I mean, your plate's full, and to have a mentor, if you can find a great mentor, you can shortcut so many things, because as an entrepreneur, you're obviously trying to figure out something that works and be unique and, have all the freedoms that you want and do all those types of things. And having a mentor, you don't have to figure out a lot of stuff.
Right.
You can shortcut because they've already done a lot of stuff, in that world. So yeah, mentor is very, very important. And it's hard to find them, especially really good ones.
Yeah. I mean, understanding, and then how to ask the right questions too. Like that's a big thing as far as like what can they give you, like you can kind of bring in that'll really help benefit you as well, right? So like what does that look like as far as like getting advice from maybe someone that's kind of been through the business side of things, or like what would you suggest someone ask, like some questions they'd ask?
Well, I think for me, and he was hard on me. I actually, when I went 100,000 in the hole, it was with him.
Right. Okay.
So, and we've stayed friends all because he's been great, but he had a bad business partner. And so I lived up there with him for 3 years up in Michigan. And, he just taught me so much about everything. But one of the things that he would do to me was we'd be having a conversation, and because he's mentoring me, he would talk for a bit and he would say, "Do you understand?" And I would say, "Yeah," because I didn't want to look stupid.
Right.
So this is the best advice I could give anybody. So he would go along and, "Do you understand?" "Yeah." Now, meanwhile, I'm starting to get lost more and more because I'm pretending that I know what he's talking about. Of course, he knows that I don't know what I'm talking about, but he just keeps it going and he goes deeper. And then he gets me down a hole and he goes, "Okay, so I know that you understand. Just explain what I..."
Yeah.
Now you look more of an idiot than you would have ever. And so then why would you have me waste my time? And why would, you look more stupid now than you did.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. What I found with great mentors, and whether they're your mentor or not, people who are passionate about their product or their knowledge about things or business, if you're in a conversation with somebody and they say something that you don't understand, if you just say, "Well, what do you mean by that?" Or I use the thing, "Hey, I'm Oklahoma educated, so you got to break that down for me," right?
Yeah.
It's just my little tweak on it. But people are happy to explain and go back. In business, you don't have to pretend like you know everything because nobody knows everything. But, expanding more on your question, and we talk 3, 4, sometimes 5 days a week, and it's just sometimes they're short conversations, other times it's not even business related. But I'm out doing things and trying things all the time. And so I'll run some of this by him. It's like, "Hey, I was out here and this is what I did, this conversation." He goes, "Oh, that's pretty good." Or he'll say, "Oh, okay, well, next time try saying this or tweaking that." Sometimes it's conversational type stuff of how you can phrase things or do things, or different ideas, because he's a marketing genius himself and was involved in TV and commercials. And the commercials that I've shot the last 2 years on the Cowboy Channel, I rough drafted them out and then he polished them off.
Okay.
And for example, when I did the one, so 2 years ago, we did the 30-day challenge. It was 30 days full blown. We paid for shipping and everything. Last year, we did a buy one, get one free. And so I can't remember exactly how I started that script. Hi, my name is John Dowdy, president of Equinety, and we're so excited to blah, 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 blah. Well, he goes, you don't want to start with we're so excited. That's like a standard thing that everybody does. He goes, so we're going to change it to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to, and so it was just like small little tweaks, and people that were watching it wouldn't even really know that it was any different than, hey, we're so excited to, versus thank you for taking the time. It's just such a tiny little tweak, and it's different, but people don't really know why it's different. And somebody with experience like he has knows how to do all that stuff. Right. Versus me, I'm kind of figuring some of this stuff out. But having a mentor that can teach you all that stuff is priceless.
Knows the psychology of like why someone would buy, talking to him like, hey, this is the benefit, as opposed to this, right, I'm selling something to you, right?
Right.
And then when you do have a product that you believe in, that you're seeing results in, like that is the thing. You do want them to try the product because it's speaking for itself. So that's really, the message you're trying to get out there.
Well, it is. And, we also have the advantage of, with so many supplements on the market, and, that's why we give away so much product, because we believe that we already know what the return is going to be. And if you really just understand why and how the product works, here are the things to look for, and you give it an honest try, you're going to be on it. And, right, so many times through the years, going back to what I said, you're really not looking for something until you are, which is typically an injured horse. Although now people are realizing, hey, with the expensive horses, you got to do some preventative care as well. But a lot of times people would buy the product and their horse would be fixed of whatever that definition is. And then they would stop. Well, then their horse would go back to the way it was before. Or even nowadays, people, they'll run out. They didn't realize they were out, and they run out for 2, 3, 4 days, and the horse just sit in fire and the way that it was, because it's just not recovering.
Right. What about, you mentioned like the conversations, and I think the one side of like being an entrepreneur is you constantly got to be coming up with ideas and how you're going to run this business, right? So having people around you that will tell you the truth, and you can work, like bounce things off of. Has that been something that's been really important to kind of make sure that you keep the train on the tracks and don't get too wild with it? Or how does that kind of look?
Yeah. I like to do creative things. And the Equinety 30-day challenge was, that was a pretty bold thing to do.
Big, right?
But at the same time, I already knew what the outcome was going to be. So on the one hand,
you had the data, you had the feedback from years, you kind of knew.
Yeah. So it's almost like making a decision with kind of already knowing what the outcome is going to be. So not going in blind. You're not just willy-nilly, hey, let's try this and let's try that. It's all the decisions that I make are based on sometimes years worth of data that I just have an inkling. And, the thing is when you have a product or products that work as well as they do, makes it a lot easier to market, and right, you can do creative things. A couple years ago when I was talking to T-Wade about, the breeder, he introduced me to Bill Myers. It was about a month after that, T-Wade calls me up and he goes, we were running some commercials and things like that. And he says, hey, I want to have the camera crew come out and do a new commercial. And he goes, but I want to, go down each stall and talk about how the products helped each one of the horses in different ways, while at the same time, there's commonalities with all of them, do a new commercial. I'm like, okay, T-Wade, these commercials are 30 seconds, right? He goes, no, not like that. He goes, like MTV Cribs.
Yeah.
And of course, leave it to T-Wade. So, and I said, what, are you going to have your hat cocked sideways with sunglasses and a doobie? And he goes, probably not the doobie part, but I said, well, let me think on that. So I called him the next day. I said, how about this? I said, we'll call it the Equinety barn check.
Yeah.
And I said, so the idea, because I'm sure there are lots of people. Well, here was my thought. People that watch the pros on the Cowboy Channel, they see their run. If they win, then they do a short interview, and then that's it. That's all they get to see of them. So my idea with this was, well, why not highlight these folks? Because I'm sure people are curious what their farm looks like, what goes on behind the scenes, things that they do. And I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it had ever been done. And so, I ran the idea by Mariah over at Equine Network and Nick Griggs over at Team Roping Journal. And so we started kind of getting the game plan together. And so Bill Myers was the first one that we did. Well, what's interesting with that is I found out that whole story of Bill Myers and Frenchman's guy had never really been told before. People knew about it and people heard it through the grapevine and everything else. But what was really neat about that is we turned it into a documentary.
Right.
And so it's about 11 minutes long and it tells their whole story. And I've watched that one probably 50 times because I'll see it every now and then. I'm just like locked in. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you can find all these on our website at teamequinety.com. But, we've done Paul Eves and Patrick Smith and T. Wade and Cheyenne Wimberly, and we've got Jordan Briggs coming up. And so we've got Driggers and Junior coming up. And, some of them I've left out, but they're on our website and they're beautifully done. And so when you go back to coming up with ideas and things like that, it's like, well, I don't think anything like that had been done in the industry. It's very expensive to produce those. And then the Cowboy Channel, we premiere them on the Cowboy Channel before we release them on our social media. So they're playing on the Cowboy Channel. I think they're even doing some reruns of them. And it's over on Ride TV. And so it's just really, really neat content. You get to kind of hear and see what these folks talk about,
Yeah, be part of it with like their journey, you know, because that's essentially what it is you're part of this journey with the horse and the rider and kind of their experience, and I think that, and to highlight that is pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool to be a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think too the neat thing with those barn checks is it's more of a marketing piece for them because, I mean, as being in the industry, a lot of them, they're training horses, they're selling horses, they might be breeding some horses, but then they're also futurian or they're rodeoing. I mean, they've got all this stuff going on. And a lot of people, unless you're in the little niche, you don't know that they're doing all these other things. And so we've kind of tried to turn these barn checks into a marketing piece for them.
Yeah.
So they can highlight the things that they want to talk about. And of course, Equinety's tied into it because they're just talking about how it's helped their horses.
Right.
So it's not a salesy, pitchy type of a thing. It's just, here's what we're doing and here's why we use it and here's what we noticed. And then they just kind of move on. So it's pretty neat.
What do you want the legacy of Equinety to be?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I've never had that question asked.
Yeah, I've thought about this. It's like, because obviously there's a lot of purpose to this business. I mean, it's all about the horse, right? And that really means a lot when you say that, because everyone, that's really, I think, a lot of the foundation of what we do, or is all of the foundation, is it's about the horse. It's about the relationship. The competition side of it is there as well, but it's like so hand in hand, right? Sure. So now you're getting down the road where you've been in this business long enough, like. When you look at it, like, do you have an idea of what you want the legacy to be? Or,
well, that is a great question. I feel humbled and honored that it seems like everywhere you look, you see Equinety. I mean, just like this past weekend with T. Wade and Thorpe, they put on this World Youth Team Roping Championship, and so we started an elite junior team, and because I figured I had an extra 30 seconds in the day. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
But, I think when you have products that work as well as they do, they work fast, it makes it easy for you as a horse owner and a rider to help your horse perform the way that you need them to perform. Several years ago, because I think what people in this industry, you know, they look for the sponsored riders, and of course you do that for the credibility piece, and I get all that. I look at the ambassadors that we have as, yes, a credibility piece, but a lot of them, well, they were all users of product before we even worked out a deal. But at some point, I think you can be oversaturated too, because, you know, they're wearing patches and this and that. And yeah, the branding is all important. But is it really about them, or is it about the horse? And it was kind of, it wasn't posed to me that way a couple years ago, but I got to thinking about it, and it's like, well, if they don't have their horse, they don't have a name. You know, sure, you've got the skills and the talent and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you can get a different horse, and, you know, there's all those elements to it. But, you know, the horses that really shine, that they're an elite athlete, just like the rider is. But if you don't have that horse, then you can't even make a run. And so it got me to thinking about, yeah, the riders are important and they bring a lot to the table because they're the mouthpiece and all that kind of stuff. But what about the horse? And so, you know, after 10 years, we changed our tagline to "It's all about the horse," because why else are we even doing this? And It doesn't matter with the ropes and the saddle pads and the saddles and all the tack and everything that comes along with it. You're doing it for your horse. So it made sense to say, hey, it's Equinety. It's all about the horse.
Right.
So going back to, you know, as far as legacy, I mean, I don't know, maybe ask me that down the road, I guess, but
two in it.
It's like I'm up to my eyeballs and everything else. I mean, again, you know, starting a junior team, I think, you know, with the credibility that we do have in the industry, I think, you know, starting a junior team, because isn't it all about the kids? I mean, because you can go that way, because that's the next generation, or it might be, you know, 2 generations away, whatever the case is. But being able to, and, you know, in this day and age, with the way that the world is, and, you know, families are going through trials and tribulations, and money's tight in a lot of cases. And, you know, these kids need an outlet to be able to, you know, take stress off of them. And, you know, animals can do that for them. But also being around the right people to help guide them and mentor and do all those types of things. And I think, you know, we built a really great ambassador team that it made sense to start a junior team.
Right.
Because now we can use all the things that we built over 11 years to now, I think, really make an easy segue into a junior team. And I don't even know what that really looks like, what the plans is. You know, I think I'll fault T-Wade with this. Hey, you got to start a junior team. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
But I think all the elements through the years the foundation's been laid to make it easy to figure out different and unique ideas to help the kids and, you know, really pour into them.
What makes a good ambassador, or a great ambassador to you, as far as like a business owner? Or what do you like? What do you look for?
I think one is the integrity. 2, for us, we needed them to believe in the product as much as I do, because why else are we doing it? I mean, you can look at a short-term plan or a long-term plan, and I guarantee you that if I dropped every single ambassador that we have, they would still use our product. So it's not about me, you know, but they believe in the product that much where they would use it. And I know for a fact there's a lot of the pros that are using product that we don't sponsor. And I talked to a lot of them, you know, and they've told me stories. So, you know, it's believing in the product, and then knowing that the people that know them in the industry, they know that they have the integrity, and they're not just going to be throwing their name behind something for the sake of doing it. Now, we could have 1 or 2 wild cards in there, or I don't know who they would be, but, you know, we might need to add a wild card.
Right.
Every family needs one, right?
I think so.
So,
what about as far as like challenges goes for the business? You know, you mentioned that earlier, like It's tough running a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But was there ever a moment where it's like, hey, it might have been one of the hardest or lowest moments that ended up making a big positive impact, kind of down the long run? Or
I would say probably the most challenging was in the very beginning when I was dealing with all of that business partner, ex-business partner. Now, I mean, that was because the company really hadn't even started. I mean, it was kind of going stuff, and then you add all the drama in there and all of that. But once that was out of the way, then I would say the next biggest challenge, is especially for a supplement, it's like, oh, another supplement,
right,
another fly-by-night. Well, having all the knowledge that I had and knowing how the product works, it's like, well, if I'm confident in what I have, then you just got to keep your nose to the grindstone and keep moving forward, because eventually you're going to tip the scales, because when you have 100 people that swear by the product and then you have one that says, oh, I didn't notice anything. Like, well, let's start asking some questions there, because why didn't you? Oh, I wasn't feeding it every day, or somebody else was feeding it, or I'm not in tune with my horse, or, there's a plethora of things that are going on. I mean, that the product works, it's amino acids. The powder, this is not amino acids. And just to clarify, there are some people that think this is the same product in two different forms, but it is not.
Right.
So the oil product works in combination with the aminos. But I would say one of the first things that when Weston was working, him and I were working both together strictly on Equinety, and we were cranking. There were sales coming in and doing things. And then we ran out of inventory. There was delays.
Supply chain.
And we're like, it had to be the worst thing. And so then I'm trying to figure out through the Shopify is what we were using, because I'm trying to figure out an app where people can still order product. We can still have the revenue coming in. But then there's, order your product now and it's 2-week delay or however long.
Yeah.
And so the first time I didn't figure that part out, and it was just people were ordering, and then we're having to make phone calls and emails, and we had a thing a banner on the top, product delays, and that's just a horrible position to be in. But I don't think that's uncommon for businesses when you're going, because you have supply chain issues and different things, and in our situation, it could be delayed if we can't get the scoop.
Yeah.
So. Or there's a label malfunction or something, But the second time that happened, then we figured out there was a little app that people, they could continue to order, and it would keep them updated. So it was a smoother flow. And then people I would talk to like, oh, but that's a good problem to have. It's like, oh, it's a good problem. You just don't want to do it.
Yeah. It's a good problem to not have again.
Yeah, that's right. So we went through that twice. And fortunately, we stay stocked up.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Did you ever read the book Shoe Dog?
No, I didn't read that one.
It's about Phil Knight and starting Nike.
Oh, okay.
And multiple times had issues of needing to, just supply chain issues. Like they're selling so much product that they need to order so much on the back end that it was just creating he didn't have money, right? And so he was needing to borrow money from banks. And you're like, this is Nike that we're talking about. And they're moving a ton of inventory, and the business is, even right before it IPO'd, that was still a major issue for this company. So it was like, there's like these little things as far as like running business that you never would think of, but it's like scaling like healthy in an appropriate manner is a big thing, because some business just can't even handle scaling fast,
Right.
And so that's like, it's like when you get some success, like, okay, well, I wasn't ready for this. So.
Yeah. There was a commercial years ago. I think it was around Christmas. I think it was a UPS commercial, because it reminded me. So these groups started their business, and so they have everything ready to go, and then it's like a sale. Yeah, and they're all cheering, and then a second sale, and they're cheering, and ting, 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 and they're like, "Holy crap! How?" And it was a UPS. It was pretty funny.
What about advice? If you could give your younger self advice, I think there's probably a few like real pivotal moments, like that 25-year-old self that is, that was got enough confidence that you're going to go out on your own, fail, and kind of go in the hole. But like, if you could give advice to that self, and then as you get to the beginning stages of Equinety, what would those two pieces of advice to yourself look like?
So one of the things my mentor would always tell me, which he would say it in a joking way, but it actually is makes sense, is never let failure go to your head.
Okay.
So just because you fall, I mean, heard the saying, and it's fall down 7 times and get up 8. And,
yeah.
The true entrepreneurs, in my mind, you don't stop. You don't put your phone up for the weekend. You don't turn it off. It's all the time. And, there's sacrifice that comes with that. In my younger days of marriage, I mean, it would irritate my wife so much, but at the same time, because I was always on the phone, and I was always on the computer, and I had 2-3 different things going all the time. And, she wanted her time.
Right.
And at the same time on mine, you're trying to balance all the stuff, because it's like, well, if I don't spend the time here, then we're not going to be able to get where we need to be to pay the bills and have this time. So there was a lot of learning curves for us in our marriage. Now she just gives it back to me, and it's this morning before I came over here, and Lane Piltram was over there, and I had my wife on speakerphone, and we're going back and forth, and I look over and Lane is just laughing because we're bantering back and forth, but we have fun, But the never let failure go to your head, and do right by people. Tell them the truth. If you can't do something, then don't BS your way through it, because it's going to come back to bite you. I mean, and I think that's very important too, because a lot of times, especially in sales, people, overpromise, underdeliver, and like, oh yeah, because they want to get the sale, they want to get paid. It's like, well, but if your product isn't going to be there for 6 months, and you tell them 2 months or whatever, just to get the sale as an example, well, now, yeah, you got paid, but now you got to spend the next 4 months explaining yourself to this person. So now your stress level goes off the chart, and then that dominoes into other things. And, it's just, if you're just straight up with people, be honest, you really can't go wrong.
Right.
In that aspect.
So just not being afraid of failure, telling the truth, just, hey, this is what I can do.
Yeah. And people respect that.
Yeah.
Because people don't like to be hornswoggled. They don't like to be lied to. They don't, it's the golden rule, So
having integrity.
It's because I guess the question is, do you want the short-term money or the long-term money and the gain?
Yeah.
With Equinety, we're trying to build something. Every single horse should be on Equinety. Now, it's not because I'm Equinety, or I'm trying to sell Equinety to everybody, but we just know what it does for your horse. And if you'll get your horse on the product, then you'll see the results too. So knowing that information, you can't just go out and promise all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, here's what you can expect. Here's what other people have expected. You just give them the truth of what it is. And sometimes it can be a slower building process. I mean, ours was very slow because we did grassroots. We didn't have any money in the beginning and to spend on advertising or anything. It was me with sample tubs, go to a show or being on the road, handing product, having conversations. But in those beginning stages, if I would have tried to dupe people and lie and overpromise and underdeliver and all that kind of stuff, then the company would have just went in the hole.
Right. And then, you've talked about faith and that being very important, but also the marriage and like having a healthy marriage on that side of it. How important has that been to your success?
Oh, my wife is so supportive, and I would say it was growing pains for both of us for a while until you kind of get, the stroke of, what the routines are every day. Because just like on this stint, which again, I don't go out a whole lot, but I'll be on the road for about 4 weeks this round. And, she doesn't like it when I leave, and she can't wait till I get back home. And, but we have a great relationship. And, but yeah, I mean, there was a lot of learning in the beginning, for sure.
Well, I think it's okay to struggle together. You're both, it's like you're learning and you're trying to figure it out, but supporting and knowing that I think that's kind of the key, right? Is someone that believes in you or will call you out a little bit too at times if you need it. And, but like kind of help it go. Right. I think that's kind of the thing.
It's, you go back to the trust. I mean, one of the things that my mentors told me way back when, because, I came out of college, I worked out every day. I mean, I was 205 and just stacked, leg pressing 22 plates, stupid stuff, By the way, I have back issues now.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It was probably worth it, I'm sure.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he always told me, he goes, girls don't care about the muscle and the good looking stuff. And I'm like, what? Like, this is, again, I'm.
Yeah, that makes no sense, right?
It makes no sense. So why am I doing this? And
what's the
point? Of course,
point?
Girls like this. He goes, no, they like funny and they like brains. Because at the end of the day, they like to have fun. They like to laugh and have fun and do all that. But they also want to be with the guy that knows what he's doing and they can count on him and trust him. And so they want brains.
Yeah.
So probably one of the other best pieces of advice he gave me, because we'll say 25. And every Monday we'd go to this restaurant and have dinner with a bunch of people and go into the bar. And, I always would drink water because I didn't drink alcohol. And he goes, well, you need to learn to drink.
Okay.
But you need to learn how to drink. I'm like, what? Because there was never drinking in my family growing up, so I just didn't do it.
Right.
So he would get me a scotch and soda, which is...
That's pretty aggressive starting out.
But the reason for that is you're not just going to suck it down. You're social. You're holding a drink.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of sipping like tiny sips. So it looks like you're drinking, but you got your wits about you and everything else. So that was learning how to drink right there.
Learning how to
Could
drink.
be a good tip. Sorry, kids. But anyways, but one night we were sitting there and he goes, have you ever noticed the guys sitting at the bar? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, that guy is there every week, same spot. That guy's there, same spot. They're all hitting on the bartenders, trying to, pick her up every week. He goes, did you ever think, and now these guys, these guys were old, probably in their 60s.
Yeah.
Me at 25. He goes, did you ever think that they were going to have life figured out? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, would you ever think by the time they were 40, like, yeah, I got life figured out. I know what I'm doing. I got this, I got that. Like, well, I never really thought about that. He goes, well, guess what? They're still trying to figure out life. He goes, so the best piece of advice I could give you is, I was 25 at the time. He goes, in your mind's eye, what does a 30-year-old look like? How do they act? What do they dress like? How do they talk? What do they do? He goes, now start practicing to be a 30-year-old. He goes, and guess what? When you're 30, you'll already know how to do it.
Yeah.
But when you're 30, now what's a 35-year-old look like in your mind's eye? And just stay 5 years ahead. And so that was a piece of advice that I think could serve anybody really well, because you're not just going to wake up one day and be a different person, because you're with you every day.
Yeah.
So whether it's entrepreneurship or working on yourself, if you want a different result, then you have to do different things. So,
and kind of gets maybe thinking long term too, correct? Like, hey, this is what it looks like 5 years from now. If you're going to be willing to, that kind of mindset is probably one a little bit more built for success. I would say, is if you can like hey, this is what I think a 30-year-old should do, and here's the things. Well, I need to be doing this for the next 5 years. Like if that mindset's there, I think that increases the odds just because you're going to be consistent at something, right?
Well, I mean, you take any of these kids or barrel racers or whoever, whatever age they are, and I'm sure they all have their favorites of the pros. And I think the great thing too about this industry is, I would say for the most part, just everybody's down to earth. They're going to take time. And if you're a kid, go up and talk to them. They're going to take the time.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then you don't want to talk to them either. It's like, but I think overall people in this industry are just so down to earth and so nice. And if you're a roper and you want to get your game better, then go talk to, if you're in an event and you see one of the guys that's better than you, or a pro, it's like, I could almost guarantee they would take you off to the side and give you a little tip here and there, So part of it is not being afraid to ask, because what's the worst that can happen is somebody tells you no. And so, at the end of the day, you got to have a little thick skin. Can't be afraid of failure. Never let failure go to your head. And you kind of got to have your goals in mind and what you want to do and press forward, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people that say that you can't do it. It's like, well, they aren't doing it either. So why do you want to fall in their league?
Right.
Other thing is there's leaders, there's followers. And if you're not one of those, get out of the way.
Yeah. What about with that, like critical feedback? Like, how do you personally try to handle critical feedback? And meaning that with we all kind of got to, maybe we don't, but I know I have an ego. And so there's times where I just got to I got to understand when someone's telling you something, how do you handle that? And then also critical feedback from maybe someone you don't really know very well, as opposed to, because I bet you get it a lot from the supplement side, right? And then someone that you do look up to, maybe it is a mentor or someone like that. So how do you handle critical feedback from those two different dynamics?
I'm confident enough in myself that the decisions I make, I feel are successful decisions or have the opportunity to be successful. If there's a decision that I'm not sure of, then maybe I don't put it into play right away. And sometimes I look for feedback. Other times if somebody's giving you unsolicited feedback, then sometimes you got to look at the source. And it's just like a naysayer. It's just like somebody, oh, well, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. Well, based on what? Because you're not in my day-to-day operations. You don't know the plans that I have or what I'm doing. It's like the inventor of something that understands every nook and cranny of everything that you're doing versus somebody that's copying you.
Right.
If you're copying somebody or trying to copy somebody's product or whatever it is, they don't understand all the nuances that went in to get you where you got today. Yeah. So there's always going to be missing pieces and all of that. So even with, a couple other products that, are jumping on the amino acid train, I guess you could call it, it doesn't bother me. I know what we have. I know I've spent a lot of time through the years to build a brand and everything. So I'm confident in our brand. I'm confident in our ambassadors. I'm confident in what we're doing for the industry. I know what it's going to do. It's all about the horse. I know what it's going to do for the horses. So there's nothing that really phases me with anything else that comes up. But, unsolicited feedback, I wouldn't say that I really get a lot of it. It's more questions because people want the best for their horse. And so if somebody says, well, what do you think about this product or that product? I don't really have any thoughts on that product because I don't study other products. I'm familiar with some because I hear them often, but I know what our product does. And if you're already using the other product, great. Just add this to it and see what happens because you already have a baseline.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to change one element, which is the amino acids. and then you tell me, see, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it would be fair for me to tell you to stop using whatever you're using and to use this, because what if your horse needs something that you're giving?
Yeah, I mean, odds are I know my horse the best.
You know it way better than I don't even know your horse, except for what you just told me.
Yeah.
Whatever that situation is. So I think that's a big advantage that we have too, is you don't have to change anything, just add this one element, and then you can make your own decisions based on that. So, I don't really get into I've never really had any confrontational type things or, ours is better than this better. I was like, hey, you might be smarter than me. I don't know.
And then what about from like the business side of it, as far as like from a mentor or someone like that, if they do give you kind of like harsh feedback, I would say. Like I would say it's like probably from a good place if it's someone you trust, but someone that will like tell you the truth, even if it might not be what you want to hear. Like how do you look at that, or how have you like looked at that maybe does help benefit you,
I think if you, like for me, because I eat, breathe, drink, sleep, Equinety around the clock, because I'm passionate about it, I love it. I love everything about it. I love all the people that I'm able to meet. I love hearing the stories. We've turned more skeptics into believers than anything, which is fun. I always like those challenges. But again, when you know what the results are, it's easy, because you kind of already won.
Right.
But when you're really in tune with the flow of what you're doing, and then, getting feedback from somebody that may not align with what you're doing, I mean, you kind of know. I mean, I know what it takes to run a business on a day-to-day thing, and the mentor he doesn't, because he's not involved. So I would say the conversations that I get in with my mentor, it's more ideas.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? Or I'm thinking of doing this, or if I am going to do a video or a commercial, I'll draft it out. Because the worst thing for a writer is to start with a blank page. That's another good tip if you're ever needing somebody to look something over, is, draft it out. And then it's easier to tweak something that's already drafted than start with a blank piece of paper.
Right. I like that. And then it's tough, when you go the idea side of things, because you're around a spot where a lot of people probably do yes you. You know what I mean? And to have someone that will like tell you the truth or what they see and give you like honest, good feedback, that's probably something you got to protect and understand a little bit as you've kind of grown in the business, I'd imagine. Yeah,
I think so too. And the other thing is, I look at all of our ambassadors as for what they are. They're not Equinety salespeople.
Right.
And so I don't expect them to do anything as far as growing Equinety. We partnered because they have integrity. They love the product. It's all about the horse. We get the feedback, the testimonials, and now we can use those testimonials and their credibility. So yeah, we're using their credibility, which is what any company's doing. That's why you do the partnership. But outside of that, I don't expect them to be out there talking to everybody about Equinety. And I know a lot of them get approached and say, hey, what do you really think about this? Because I know you're wearing a patch. Well, they give them their honest opinion. And so it's also why, getting into running commercials. But I don't think anybody likes the pitchy type commercials, because nobody likes to be pitched on stuff. They want to make their own decision, not be forced into something. So all of the stuff that we do is try to be non-pitchy as possible. It's genuine. Like the commercial we shot last year with the 13 or 14 guys, the BFI commercial, and even with the girls we shot, the ropers. I think that's such a powerful commercial because you've got the top people all in 60 seconds. And then we go to the NFR, and the Cowboy Channel needed a 30-second commercial. And I'm like, okay, well, and then it was suggested, well, maybe you take out the guys that didn't make the NFR. I'm like, okay, well, that brings 13 down to 9.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's not going to work. So I kept watching the commercial over and over and over. I'm thinking, what can I cut out? I'm like, everybody knows these people. So I'll cut out the entire 30 seconds of where they're saying 13 times this, 2 times this, 14 that. And, so I cut all that out and it brought it right down to 30 seconds. And so a lot of it, if you really understand your business and you're passionate about what you're doing and it's a long-term play, not a short-term gain. And you're going to have short-term gains and stuff, but you have to look at the long-term of it all. Otherwise, you're not going to be around.
Long-term mindset.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you surround yourself with the right people. And, a lot of times I'll be in an event and depending on who it is, I mean, sometimes I'll have conversations with, some of our guys and gals and, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But I'm not counting on them to grow Equinety. That's my job. And so because of T-Wade, the fault of the Equinety barn check. Yeah. But see, T-Wade, as you know, T-Wade, he's full of ideas, and there's a lot of good ideas he's got. But
and he'll do them too. That's the other thing. He'll move forward just like that roping. When he's got something. Him and I talked about that the other day, and I do really respect him for that. I think that's cool.
Yep. Yeah, and Thorpe as well. It's really all the guys that we've got, they're all passionate about what they're doing. They love the industry. They love everything, and it's been a great partnership with us. But I think the idea with the Equinety barn checks is I also wanted to utilize those to control our message or direct our message.
Yeah.
So even though, so we sponsor our ambassadors, and then it's like, well, I'm going to go above and beyond and spend X amount of dollars to produce these and then spend the money to show on the Cowboy Channel. And so it's like, just because you have a sponsored rider doesn't mean the game's over. You're just now starting. And so producing all this stuff. And I know a lot of them have been on commercials and stuff, but I try to do things that maybe haven't been done before that are, they're neat. People like to watch them. They're informative. And so I think with the barn checks is a prime example of that. They're costly, but I think they're worth it because they're great for the industry. They're great for them. It's great for us. It's a win-win-win all the way around. I think too, as an entrepreneur and as you're doing different deals and partnerships, if it's not a win-win around the board, it can never be one-sided because again, it'll work right now, but word spreads fast.
Right. John, you want to add anything else? I think that's...
Oh man, I'm almost out of words.
I know I got a lot out of you today. But I thought that was so much fun just to, because I know hey, we've dive into the product and that, but actually what you do too, and your role in it, it's cool. There's a ton of passion, this is something you've created and been there from grassroots to, moving it into the Western industry to where it's at now has been pretty impressive. So it's cool to see someone have a great product, a company that's working, that's being successful, that's making a positive impact on the industry. I think that's what you want. You know what I mean? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It's humbling, because 4 years ago we didn't have a team roper, for example. Now, it's just spread and, we got a lot of the breakaways and a lot of barrel. It's just kind of spreading all over the place, but, it's definitely humbling, it's exciting. I love doing what we do and, going to these events, and it's fun to see your brand seems like everywhere.
Yeah.
But it takes time to do all that. And, if you're doing right by people and, just honest and integrity and all that stuff that comes along with it, it's, it's the fruits will pay off.
Absolutely. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.